is said that every legend, every myth, and every folk tale has a true core, somewhere. Whether characters are based on actual persons, tales based on historic events, or often they tell us about creatures or ghostly apparitions that are subject to a curse. And although curses probably don't exist in the exaggerated make-believe form we know from story, their truth lies in their allegorical nature. Because curses don't just exist in folklore, fairy tales, or fantasy novels. In our everyday lives, words and actions can hold more power over us than we often realize. A harsh word, a broken promise, rejection, or a broken heart, a strain of bad luck, or the loss of a loved one. All of this can make us feel like we're actually cursed. Feeling cursed is a part of life that we all experience eventually, one way or another. So yes, in a way, curses are very real, which is why it's no surprise that an abundance of beasts, spirits, and demons from ancient folklore all around the world, often emerged culturally completely independent from each other, revolve around souls that are burdened with sinister curses of immeasurable severity. Many cursed creatures and apparitions, while intriguing, scary, and sometimes appalling on the surface, are based on sad and emotionally gripping tales with a very relatable core. In the world of The Witcher, a setting that generously weaves legends, tales, and myths from a broad variety of traditional European and Slavic folklore into its fabric, this is of course no different. When you hunt down a monster on Geralt's adventures, or read how he cunningly trails, pursues, outwits, and slays an evil beast for coin in one of Sapkowski's stories, chances are that there's a heart-wrenching story behind the gory remains in front of you. One of the most memorable cursed creatures in this universe is arguably the Botchling. For one, because it is strikingly repulsive. But that is really only its most superficial attribute.
Saying a botchling's ugly is like saying shit's not particularly tasty. Can't say it's a lie, but doesn't exactly convey the whole truth either.
Its hideous outer appearance can almost be seen as a metaphor for the ugliness of its predicament, since it's born from pure sadness and desolation. Botchlings emerge from the corpse of an unwanted newborn, when a mother, or parents of a newborn in general, cast out their defenseless infant into the wilds, or, in rare cases, when a stillborn child gets discarded without a proper burial, without being given a name.
You give the child a name? No. Why would we? Mistake. Names are powerful seals.
The void of parental affection this discarded child is doomed with can drive its abandoned soul to inspirit its decaying corpse and come back to life with a feverish hunger for maternal love. Botchlings therefore resemble the likeness of a partially decayed fetus, their unformed flesh twisted with hate, fear, and malice. Large, underdeveloped pop eyes, their withering umbilical cord still tangled around their necks, worn like a talisman of abandonment, and their upper lip horribly disfigured by a massive orofacial cleft, a genetic birth defect in which the facial tissues of the nasal region and the palate fail to properly join during prenatal stages of development. To satiate their mad hunger, botchlings develop a vampiric, predatory instinct that drives them to emerge from their lair at night and prey on expectant mothers. First, by inducing feverish nightmares until they end up in a severely weakened state of delirium. It is then the botchling singes its sharp fangs into her flesh, draining her body of blood and life energy until mother and fetus perish together. If it is threatened, the botchling can shapeshift into a deformed ape-like creature that channels its anger into fierce attacks, hurling itself at its foe with ferocious blows and scratches from its vicious claws. The only way to save the botchling's soul is when a parent embraces it as one of its own, baptizes and ceremonially buries it as a family member. This rite will put its soul finally to rest so it can emanate as a lubberkin, a guardian spirit that watches over the family it never knew in the household it never could call its home. While the Botchling, as it is depicted in The Witcher, is exclusive to this universe, we can find an abundance of remarkably similar creatures in real-world folklore from all around the globe. Japanese folklore, for instance, tells of the Konaki-Jiji, a yokai or ghostly apparition that can either assume the form of an old man or a baby. In either case, the Konaki-Jiji is the spirit of an infant that was abandoned into the wilderness by their parents. Its spirit then lives on to roam the countryside and seek out unwary travelers, to lure them in with heartbreaking cries and sobs and demanding to be taken to the nearest graveyard. But once the traveler picks it up and carries it, the Konaki-Jiji suddenly becomes heavier and heavier until the victim is crushed to death by its weight. Sometimes, the Konaki-Jiji is referred to as the Japanese Myling, because it is uncannily similar to a traditional Scandinavian folktale, the Myling. Mylinga originate in ancient Swedish folklore, and just like the Botchling, they are cursed spirits born from the soul of an abandoned infant that was left to die in the wilds, unbaptized and without being given a proper burial. Very similar to its Japanese counterpart, Mylinga are ghostly apparitions that roam the countryside at night, sneaking up on lone wanderers and jumping on their backs, demanding to be taken to the nearest graveyard. They are often described as eerily glowing specters, resembling a partially decaying fetus or stillbirth, pretty much how the Lubberkin spirit is portrayed in The Witcher 3. And just as the Botchling, Mylinga are said to be similarly vampiric in nature, feeding on their victims' life energy, draining them of strength with every step of the way. We can also find several recorded tales of infanticide demons in different branches of Slavic mythology. The Drekovac, for example, is a creature endemic to southern Slavic regions, especially around the regions of Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia, and Herzegovina. According to legend, the appearance of Drekovac varies greatly across different tales. Sometimes it's described as a thin, spindle-legged, dappled humanoid beast with a disproportionately large head, while other accounts depict it as a furry, werewolf-like creature with long claws. Or sometimes they're also said to assume the likeness of a pale, partially decaying infant. What all accounts agree on is that it is, once again, the death of an unbaptized infant which caused the Drekovac to emanate. In all likelihood, though, the Botchling's main influence is the Poroniec. I mean, that's even how it's called in the Polish version of The Witcher 3. This one is, unsurprisingly, a myth that's more common to northern Slavic regions, especially Poland. According to the Bestiariusz Słowiański, it's a winged demon that arises, once again, when a stillborn child was improperly buried without baptism and outside of the threshold of the family's home, no matter if the miscarriage was due to an accident or self-inflicted. The Poroniec is said to resemble a newborn chicken, albeit being roughly the size of the discarded fetus. Aside from this difference in appearance, it does share the vampiric behavior of feeding on pregnant women with its witcher cousin. And according to legend, there is also a chance that the soul of a stillborn child can turn into a friendly house spirit called a kłopok. But unlike in Geralt's universe, this is only possible if it is buried on the family's property right after the miscarriage. Minor difference here. This was only a small selection of a broad variety of folk tales out there, sad and eerie legends of lonesome, troubled spirits, monsters, and demons that all originate in infanticide, and it is more than likely that the writers of The Witcher took some of them as a direct influence when they came up with the Botchling, a pastiche of real-world legends spiced with an individual twist, tailored specifically around the story told in the Family Matters quest surrounding the Bloody Baron in The Witcher 3. But isn't it fascinating and also spine-chilling to think just how many cultures all across the globe, often totally independent from each other, came up with practically the same tale? Just like there is an astounding amount of recorded vampire myths in many different cultures and time periods, does that mean that we all share some form of collective unconscious, like the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Gustav Jung suggested? Or does it maybe even insinuate that there lies truth behind those coexisting myths and legends? One of the greatest faculties of the human mind is our ability to find patterns and assert meaning to what appears to be random. This ability, combined with the innate drive to solve problems and seek knowledge and explanations for the unknown, is the force that made us evolve from cave-dwelling hunters and gatherers to the globalized information society we are today. But our pattern-finding ability is far from flawless. When you combine our deepest fears with ignorance, it creates an irresistible urge for answers. But when our understanding of the world can provide us with empirical certainty, we seek patterns in make-believe to come up with those answers. It is called false pattern recognition. It's the reason why, over thousands of years, many different civilizations all across the globe believe the appearance of a comet in the sky to be a bad omen, predicting war, famine, plague, death, you name it. Only until astronomers like Isaac Newton and Edmund Halley debunked the universally accepted divine influence in the cosmic theater. It is also the reason why, until the application of the scientific method through psychology and cognitive science, people were convinced that things like depression, anxiety, and insomnia were caused by mythical demons. Like, for instance, the German folkloric creature known as the Alp. It was commonly accepted that mental conditions were caused by demonic influence, often attested with vampiric attributes as well. A creature that would invade your dreams, induce feverish nightmares, and sit astride your chest, growing heavier until their weight starts you from your sleep, terrified and breathless. On a side note, the Alp also makes an appearance in The Witcher's universe, although their portrayal has a heavier emphasis on their vampiric origins. They are featured in the Blood and Wine DLC and depicted as a more rotten and feral cousin of the Bruxa. The Alp from German folklore is also where the term nightmare that we still use today originates from. We can find this creature depicted in the 1802 painting Nachtmahr by Johann Heinrich Füssli, and that title literally translated means, you guessed it, nightmare. But what does that have to do with botchlings and their real-world counterparts? In many sources, Alps are described to feed on the grief of mothers who had a miscarriage, or who are forced, due to dire circumstances, to discard her helpless newborn. These days, we have the means to empathize, not just emotionally, but also rationally, to understand why such a traumatic experience often becomes a catalyst for things like PTSD and comorbid conditions like depression, anxiety, insomnia. But back in the pre-scientific era, people firmly believed that they were hexed, cursed by the soul of their deceased offspring, which caused their ongoing paralyzing torment. And really, child abandonment was not an uncommon thing. Poor folk in Dark and Middle Ages, and heck, still in large parts of the world today, faced the threat of looming starvation if they couldn't afford providing for another child. Birth control and abortion were both not medically available and equally condoned by pretty much every clerical patriarchy in place, no matter where. And I guess we're still struggling with the latter. So if you were poor and you knew you'd face the gallows and eternal damnation for aborting your child, killing your own kin in secret was often your only viable option. Just imagine that. Wouldn't that make you feel cursed? The existence and prevalence of tales like Möhlings, Poroniec, and Konaki-Jijis insinuates that such a fate was a commonplace phenomenon. And naturally it would arise an urge for answers and explanations, propelled by our deepest fears. This is how mythology comes into life, and how the tales that stand the test of time come together. Because you might have noticed, each one of those folk tales also features an element of redemption. When the spirit's longing for the proper burial that was withheld during its lifetime is met, so the folklore tells, their souls can finally rest in peace. And this is why among the vast and diverse bestiary of The Witcher, among the dozens of tales of ancient creatures and magical beasts, the Botchlings stood out as one of the most powerful stories to me. Not just because it is ugly, but because it mirrors dark and forgotten days of our ancestors, combining the essence of uncountable tragic fates into tales that people passed on over the course of centuries and that have become mythology. Works like The Witcher help to preserve those stories of memories that would otherwise fade into oblivion and perpetuate them to live on as modern mythology. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little expedition into the mythological influences of Sapkowski's intriguing fantasy universe. As always, a thank you goes out to all the people who support my channel on Patreon. Feel free to hop over if you want to pitch in as well. This time, my special gratitude goes out to these top-tier supporters: Caroline Mills, Simon Anderson, Lucas, Travis Deng, Evan Tekru, Sebastian Garcia, Jacob Woodward, Dimitri Pirak, James Lynch, Luke Johnson, Danny Sendel, Darkblue1, Tiago Pereira da Santos Silva from Portugal, Milan Vujnovic, Carlos Vega, Marissa Martinez, Michelle Stoliker, David Legado, Adele Al-Falasi, Christopher Collish, Nicholas Stevenson, Ronnie Meinert, and Ian Melancon. So, until next time, remember, the truth is out there.